Hi, comrade. Welcome to our podcast series. These episodes feature the best of Lab-Left, an international forum organized by Szikra Movement in collaboration with Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. We gathered in Budapest in November 2024 in order to discuss how to win from the left. Thanks for tuning in. The Green Eastern Europe panel focused on building environmentalism from the left in Eastern Europe. It featured Bojana Novakovic from Masadrina, Serbia, Iskra Krstic from Political Serbia, Bence Tordai, an MP from Hungary, Kristina Hamplova from Reset and Limitisme Mi, Czech Republic. The panel was moderated by Lili Vanko. So we're in the dark after the first panel went down. It's cold. We're wearing our coats, cold outside but fired up inside because we just came out of a very interesting panel. Lily, what were your feelings or what are your main takeaways?
I think the panel maybe also went slightly differently than I anticipated, but this is usually the case, right? Like, I think the two things I really wanted to discuss were the questions of what specificities Eastern European environmentalism might have, and sort of in line with the overall framing of the conference, this issue of coalition making, what challenges might come up, how to overcome them. And both of these popped up, but maybe under a different light than I would have expected, which was quite exciting. I think most panelists also, in terms of coalition making, they brought in more interpersonal examples or on this like really granular scale of spending time in a camp with people that they might disagree with on a lot of issues and how to work around that. Or this other question of, well, a huge part of that is also sustaining a community within your activist group and how to do that and how to sort of keep going and how to deal with questions of mental health, even like briefly popped up. So I think the issues that I hope to discuss were there, but sometimes in maybe like surprising ways, but I was quite happy about that.
What surprised you exactly?
Well, the people, also like took a different framing, and this is to be expected, I guess, but you never know what comes out exactly. I mean, there were some funny parts of this, like, this topic in itself maybe is not something that easily lends itself to humor, the green transition, but there...
You'd be surprised.
But yeah, there were some like recurring jokes and sort of what I also really liked, and it was something that I was really hoping for, that people sort of riff off one another. That one panelist would say something and this comes back, and this was there, I thought, so, which is always nice as a moderator that you're not just asking one question and then you get an answer, because then it makes for sort of a less dynamic conversation.
It did feel a bit like a group discussion of actually people getting together and discussing challenges and not just saying their own shtick.
Yeah, which was, I was very happy about that.
Yeah, and I think what I liked about the panel, as you say, is the element of surprise. Like, we don't know how the green transition is going to unfold and is going in lots of different directions. Like, who thought like 4 or 5 years ago that Hungary would become electric battery superpower. And I think the conversation in a way reflected that. Anything in particular that you feel you could have talked more about on the panel?
Yeah, I think I also try to very briefly maybe also frame it as like questions of ecological questions or questions of a green transition are never only about ecology, right? I think this is commonly agreed upon, and I try to incorporate it. And there's some panelists, for instance, Kristina, whose work
that was really good,
centered around housing. So I try to sort of bring this into the conversation, that it's never just like a single issue that you're organizing around, and this indeed like intersects with many other like elements of social life. And I think at the end we got a question on that I really appreciated. Also in the context of Eastern Europe, specifically in the context of Hungary, that sort of what often gets forgotten is how these changes or affect marginalized groups and what sort of voice there is for them, and often that actually the issues that say like a Roma community face in Hungary are more to do with their housing quality or their access to energy in the first place. So I think to receive a question on that was also a good reminder that yes, I did talk about the intersections of the social and the ecological, but this is way wider than we had time to discuss.
And I think that's perhaps something a bit specific to the whole debate around the green transition, because basically this topic is everything, right? Because at the core, it's about what kind of planet are we living on and whatever next steps to take. And as you say, sometimes the most salient features of these struggles will be unexpected and will be connected to, land use or housing, or Bojana mentioned also this law they tried to pass in Serbia, which suddenly becomes like a lightning rod for struggles.
Yeah, so I think we managed to in the end cover a lot of ground, and that's primarily thanks to the amazing panelists who really brought in like unexpected facets of their own experience and really spoke openly and honestly, which I really appreciated, that there wasn't like this, indeed, as you said, this like dull vibe of I have some lines that I reiterate, or I'm gonna talk about my research in a very academic way. And it was more about, it was a friendly atmosphere in which they could like openly talk about challenges that they face. Or
the challenges, I think, is important, and also maybe you as a panelist felt a bit challenged sometimes. And I know it's not the most comfortable position to be in, but I mean, you handled it great, and I think that shows that the questions here matter, and it's not just some abstract issues. And also, I appreciated Bojana also talking about the fact when she was trying to kind of moderate between different groups and just like breaking down. And I would wish we could have this kind of level of honesty throughout,
to the whole conference. So, well.
So I think it was a nice start, and I think it was a good way to start the conference, basically with a panel that's both about everything, and because it's but it's also very specific. And so maybe the last question I wanted to ask you. So the first thing you asked of them is about the kind of the specificities of East European environmentalism. And did any of your like ideas or perspectives on this maybe shift a tiny bit, or any new elements that came?
Well, I was expecting maybe different answers, but then again, like I think I also said in the panel that I'm very frustrated with this way of framing East European environmentalism in academia. Even in academia, there's like this lack of literature on this, that this is something that predates the regime change, or this is something that actually maybe in some cases, like Romania, I think particularly was like a huge aspect of the regime change that like actually, people have been mobilizing around environmental issues.
Even Hungary.
Yeah, Hungary as well. And like, they have not necessarily been framed as such as they would be currently. But this is like, these are very important histories. And I think there's also like the other thing maybe I would have liked to talk about more, and it maybe did come up to some extent, like, and let me try and phrase this, that I think also this question of like tackling climate change and who's responsible is also framed in a certain way in a lot of Eastern European countries, and this like facade of us not having contributed so much to it. But actually a lot of Hungary will be extremely adversely affected by climate change. So you cannot just sweep up this topic, and you have to like meaningfully engage with it. And I think, we try to talk a bit about how very often sort of authoritarian regimes try to like sort of latch onto this issue and frame it in their own way. And I think this is like particularly acute, or maybe it's just I'm more aware of it in an Eastern European context. So I'm glad this came up, and I think the panelists have said things that maybe I wouldn't have anticipated. So I'm going
this was kind of a good panel and of a good moderator. Thank you so much. I think we had a really nice launch to the forum, and
looking forward to the rest, where I will be sitting in audience and asking questions.
Yeah. Thanks.
Városi tornyok most oly némán álltunk, boldogságra, virágcsokorra várunk.
So I will give a brief introduction to all of you, and I hope not to mispronounce any names of organizations rather than your actual names. So I will go in no specific order. Maybe you can also wave when I say your name so people know who you are. Next to me I have Szikra Kristic, who's a researcher at Polekol, an organization for political ecology, also a journalist at the internet media Machina, and a member of the Right to Water Initiative and Solidarity political platform, which are all based in Belgrade. Using her academic background in urban planning and political science, she focuses on matters of spatial justice. Over there we have Bojana Novakovic, who's an award-winning actress, organizer, and researcher. She coordinates the Masedrine, okay, maybe you can correct me, campaign against Rio Tinto in Serbia. She spent 2023 at Boston University's Institute for Global Sustainability as a research fellow and co-authored papers on the development of solar energy in the American West, focusing on the link between green transition and the continuity of colonialism and themes of state and corporate corruption. She's also the director of an upcoming documentary film, The Forbidden Aunt. Next to me on my left, I have Bence Tordai, a politician and a member of parliament since 2018. From 2022, serving as an independent green representative for a district in Buda. He has been in politics since 2007 and co-founded 2 green parties. He's also known in Hungary for an array of protest actions in the face of an increasingly authoritarian political climate. In winter and summer, he cycles everywhere, and to this I can testify in person because sometimes I see him cycling on my street and believes that green is the new red. And last but not least, we have Kristina Hamplova, a climate activist and a member of Limiti Jismini, okay, thank you, a grassroots movement resisting the coal industry and organizing climate camps in Czech coal mining regions, with the most recent one focused on just transition and housing for ex-miners and their communities. Before joining Limiti Jismini, Kristina co-founded a student initiative, Universities for Climate, and organized strikes and occupations. For the last 2 years, she's been working at Reset, where her activities centered mostly around fossil finance, supporting a movement research and action regarding one of Europe's biggest polluters, EPH. And this reminded me that I was probably introduced before, but I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of this panel. So maybe I should also do that. Although some of our Szikra comrades, we all know each other. So my name's Lili Vanko, and I'm a member of the Szikra Movement. I'm mostly involved in the external committee. And my own background is also linked to the topic that we're all discussing here. Currently, I'm doing a PhD at the Central European University in Vienna, which focuses on a site of coal phase-out and renewable energy transition in East German region. So I think there's a lot of commonalities in what we are about to discuss here. Maybe a small notice that this panel is scheduled for 90 minutes, but we'll only be talking on stage for 75, and then we'll leave some room for questions. So maybe at the end I will also ask some volunteers to help me with the microphones, and maybe someone can also signal to me when the time is running up, because it's easy to lose track of it. So now I gave a small introduction to each of our panelists, but I would also like you to introduce yourself a little bit more so we can establish a common ground for this conversation. So I have 2 questions for all of you that you can go in any order, basically. But I'm wondering, first of all, what is it that brought you to this field of green organizing? If you can talk about your personal motivation or what led you to this. And you can also highlight, please, one aspect of your current work or the project you're currently working on, what it is that you deem most interesting for this audience, or even a recent success, as you all prefer. And who would like to go first? Yeah? Then I will pass on this mic to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everybody for being here, especially if you went for a 2 hours walk. We talked a bit about this question earlier, and I realized that I was kind of politicized when I dug worms from the ground when I was a kid. But because I had this privilege that the older people around me explained how life works and how the life processes work and how you need rain to feed all the animals and to feed the plants and how everything needs to be in balance in order to survive, and how these things are really complicated. This was also a part of Yugoslav education, so this is what we got from the media as kids in the 70s and the 80s. Which is totally missing now. I guess that kids' programs don't show these kinds of things. I remember, and I think every kid from Yugoslavia remembers a famous TV show in which the presenter, first made the world and then took a hose and connected it to. You remember this? No, took a hose and planted it on the end of a car and then ruined the world with what was coming out of the car. So maybe this is what paved the way for the green movement.
So very early on.
Very early on. Catch them while they're young. But for me personally, I studied urbanism at Faculty of Architecture in Belgrade, and then I was really involved emotionally and mentally with the struggles around public space, which grew bigger and bigger since 2000 and maybe 10, 11 on. And then this cannibalist capitalism that we live in turned from, eating up the public housing and eating up the industry and eating up the public spaces. And then after that turned against the nature and against the only thing that we had left. So our cities, the cities of the post-socialist region, are much less green than they used to be. Our countryside is ruined, and we've come to the point that, particularly in Serbia, our national spatial plan involves 40 mines. So we're really becoming Latin America in that respect. And this is when people Bojana works with, started fighting really strongly against this. One is for reasons which Bojana will talk more about, partly existential, also economy reasons, because the agriculture is literally the only thing that we have left in Serbia, and it's also been neglected a lot, and partly because of a kind of an also emotional attachment to the nature and the loss of this myth that we can all go back to the countryside. Well, thanks.
Thank you very much for that. A short technical pause that we managed to procure your tea in this cold. So if you give us a second, Rita will hand this over.
We wanted tea. It wasn't for me, but you also did.
Yeah. So this is how we battle the cold here. And I think, Bojana, you were kind of mentioned in this answer. So if you would like to continue.
Yeah. Is this work? It's a very odd microphone. Okay. So my name is Bojana Novakovic, and what's the question again?
What brought you to this field? What's your personal motivation? And any aspect of your current work you'd like to highlight? Or maybe tell us more about.
Feels like I have to give my resume. Okay. So the field was brought to me. I'm going to be super brief. There was no one to do this organizing on a national level in Serbia, and so I did it. Because the theme of Rio Tinto in and of itself wasn't very popular. I grew up in Australia. I'm a migrant. I went there with my family when I was 7. Political discourse has been, I guess, a part of my upbringing because we were glued to the television to find out what was happening in Yugoslavia from about 5 p.m. to about 7 p.m. every night in my house. The first, I guess, protest I organized, I was 14. There was no internet, so But yeah, it was a school walkout and 3,000 kids turned up. It was in Sydney. It was against Jacques Chirac's nuclear testing. And then since then, personally, I've always been involved in whatever is happening within whatever community I'm living in. But in 2020, during COVID, as much as I sort of did certain work in the US, because I live in the US, I did a bunch of work with Black Lives Matter and White People for Black Lives because that was what was the most important and relevant sort of element of the community I lived in, which was in Los Angeles, and there was a whole bunch of prisons being funded and things like this. In 2020, I went back to New York where I live, and there was a bunch of diaspora from Serbia sort of discussing police violence. That led to discussions with other civil society groups, and that led to someone mentioning that Rio Tinto was in Serbia wanting to open a lithium mine, which then made me think, we can make this big. I know we can make this big. That was my only thought, is like, we can literally use this theme to kind of open up conversation around environmental justice, green transition, all of it. And so then I approached a group who had a good, good reach with the public, and no one had time in that group, and they said, why don't you start a working group? And so we did, and I guess a movement formed. But I do need to say that prior to us doing that on that national level, locals in the area really started self-organising as well, probably for about 6 months before that, and we'll get into more details but that's kind of how I got into it. Yeah. And now I'm in Serbia 6 months of the year when I'm not working, so it's definitely been like a huge shift personally as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think this also shows that issues of climate they can never really treat them in isolation, and there's all these intersections with social issues and housing issues, and this is something we'll come to later as well. And who would like to take on the word? Perfect. So Bence, if you could answer these questions and focusing on whatever aspect you like.
Yeah. Hi guys. Do you hear me? More or less.
It's a weird mic.
A bit. Probably you know me better than all the other panelists, so I wouldn't be too long. But I would like shortly sum up my journey till now. I was always interested in or obsessed with politics and the news. I have strong political memories since I was like 8 or 9 years old. I was reading the daily newspapers, so it's a bit of sick probably. But I never really wanted to be a politician. My grandmother told me that you will be a prime minister. No, thank you. Okay. And I consciously kept myself away from party politics. Since, I was that time member of College for Social Theory, which is a well-known community of the Hungarian New Left. And the political situation was very disillusioning at that time. And one of my good friends, Gábor Sehing, just asked me, we are setting up a new party. It will be the perfect party, an eco-political party. Are you interested in chipping or not? And my intellectual journey was, it was a milestone for me because as a left-wing thinker, I always felt something is missing from my vision, and when I realized that there is something like eco-politics, and we can just found a Green Party on that base, I felt that I'm home, and it will be great. And it didn't really become great, but it was a relatively successful story for the short run, and later on we just screwed up, but it's another part of the story.
Yeah, we'll ask about that, but very gently, I promise. Thank you. And then we have Christina left.
Yes, you can hear me like this, right? Yeah. Hi. So I think I love talking about this because everybody has such a unique journey to what was how you were brought into the movement. Mine is also really different. I come from a really very right-wing family, and both of my parents are far-right activists. So I was
for very well nice. Need to lose.
Yeah, well, yes. So the dinners are funny, you can imagine, but yeah. So for a long time, I just shared their views. I even remember that when Margaret Thatcher died, I shared her picture on Facebook, and I wrote that I'm very sorry for this because we should have more women in politics like she was. So you can see the journey I've come. It was a long way. But yeah, I mostly got like radicalized or changed my mind or something on the issues of housing in Prague and on empty houses that I saw around and homeless people. And I didn't really need like much political education for it to not make sense or for like me to figure out, wait, there's like something wrong about it. But I then joined and became active in the climate because they had better infrastructure and they could actually take people in. So I think that was the issue, and I always just wanted to organize for social justice, and I didn't really care about the particular issue. That was it. So I became like heavily involved in the climate movement, and then like it kind of led me into the realization that there's a big like disequality or like big differences even within the Czech Republic, and that the coal regions are really like living on such lower standards than even us in Prague are. And I think like right now what I'm doing is like mostly I'm like organizing a campaign against EPH, which is this like huge coal and gas company that is owned by a Czech billionaire. So like we connect people from different countries who have their critical struggles, and we help them organize and we help them with information and resources and stuff like this. But I think what is like more interesting or more relevant to like you guys from your work is the work that was already mentioned that we did with the ex-miner communities where we like resisted and are still resisting evictions of ex-miners. I think we can get into that later, so I don't need to take up more time.
Yeah, I would love to get into that later. So there will be questions on this. Thank you for introducing yourselves as well. And then now we'll move on to these thematic blocks that I mentioned at the very beginning. So I think I find it quite interesting to talk about sort of Eastern European specificities of what is unfolding, what is the green transition, and maybe as a way to sort of frame this issue, my experiences, and it's something that I'm very often like disillusioned or angry with, is that there's this like notion that environmentalism became a thing in Eastern Europe after the regime change, and all these Western ideas flogged in, and then Western NGOs came and taught us like how to care for the environment. And this is something like, okay, I'm simplifying, but there's a lot of literature there's this prevalent notion, and there's, I think, to dig out sort of literature or work on the sort of roots of environmental thinking in Eastern Europe actually requires a lot of work, like often like archival work. So it's like there is a history that I think is not illuminated in the way it should be. And we don't need to get into the historical details, but maybe as like a sort of framing that, yes, like Eastern Europe also plays a part in like propelling a green transition, and this is not built on sort of like Western roots necessarily. So then I was hoping we could sort of discuss issues around this, or even like more contemporary issues of how you see this unfolding currently in Eastern European context. And I don't know if any of you, or this is just like my own personal hill I will die on, or if any of you have any thoughts as to like what you see as sort of like a specificity of Eastern European environmentalism in your own work, working with communities even, or like your own upbringing, like do you encounter sort of like regional environmental histories? Are they important to you? Are they being erased? Or is it the part of your work to try and sort of reclaim these? So I don't know if anyone would like to speak to this.
Can you just repeat the question a little bit?
Sure. Okay, I have a long question. So what do you think, are there any specificities to Eastern European environmentalism? And what do you make of sort of like regional environmental histories?
Okay, we can add that maybe.
I can talk. What is it working? Is it different? Is the
You all should be working, but on the stage you can't really sense that they are. But I would like to ask if there's, at any point you can't hear us, can you raise a hand or something? So then we know. It's good? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I can just talk, and then you can like form your thoughts and say something better while I'm just like babbling. No. Well, so I think like organizing in Eastern Europe is specific, and like we don't really need to like explain this, I think, in here. But like I don't know, just like a few days ago, the Czech Prime Minister said that like if we give him another 4 years, we're going to have the same wages as in Germany. And it wasn't even met with like any kind of outrage or something. To me, it looked like people were just sorry for him that he's so crazy. Like everybody was just like, oh, he's losing it. He's like not making sense anymore. Like everybody knows that's not going to happen. So like if you live in a society that's like economically disadvantaged, of course people are going to have less time for organizing and less time for doing stuff that like, especially environmental activism. If you don't live in an area that's like directly affected, for example, by mining, it's kind of a luxury, you know? So like, of course, this is different. And also like there, it's hard to organize when you have to be the one that's building the communities, when they're like partly destroyed by communism, but also by the process of leaving communism and by the 90s. So like if you live in a society where you cannot work on already existing communities, collectives, unions and stuff like this, it's way harder to ever build a struggle, because most of the big mobilizations, they just don't happen out of the blue. They happen because like there are already some structures in place. So I think this is like the biggest challenge that we have with, and also like another thing is like I don't know how it's in here or how it's in your countries, but I suppose it's going to be very similar, that like every time you mention the idea that like maybe if something is a basic human need, maybe it doesn't need to be in private hands because it's not going to end up well. You're just going to get called a communist and like too radical, and you're going to be looked as if you're insane. So like that's also very hard because you can just say, oh yeah, we don't want this, and then when you talk about the solutions, you have to be like, well, the solution, yeah, it's not like it shouldn't be in private hands. So I think this is also very specific. But you're absolutely right that there's already like big basis of environmentalism in Eastern Europe, and even like of like the whole underground movement in the Czech Republic was always connected to the environmental movement. It played a big part even in the Velvet Revolution and everywhere. Like it was always there present. And it's a stupid narrative to erase this.
Thank you for that. I think the laughter from the crowd also indicates that indeed the moment you mention maybe private property is not great, you're straight up branded. So I think that's a shared trait.
Yeah, it might be. It might be in Serbia, in particular. It's not entirely so because people from Serbia still have pleasant memories from Yugoslavia. So in a few respects, at least when you mention Yugoslavia in Serbia, and of course because Yugoslavia we had a combined economic system, so partly planned economy, partly market economy. But what I wanted to just scratch upon the answers of your questions. I think that it might have been in Europe as a continent, it might have been difficult to forge a strong environmentalist movement, let's say, until it became obvious that climate was changing very much and that pollution is so widespread and so dangerous. Because to understand this, we need to go back to the early 20th century and go back to the dogmas of mobility and auto transport being the one that will solve all kinds of problems, especially the ones in the cities. Eastern Europe was actually really urbanized. I'm not sure now about the numbers, but it's as urbanized in the sense of the percentage of the population living in urban environments as Western Europe, and perhaps even more so was in 1990. And what was specific about Eastern Europe and Eastern European cities in comparison to the Western cities, and especially American cities, which were basically planned by Standard Oil, is that it had fine public transport, and it had a lot of green spaces. And about this you can read especially in the UN Habitat issue, the UN Habitat researchers from 2009, and so where it is clearly stated that one of the two major things that post-socialist cities lost is green spaces, and green spaces, public transport, and also it's the cities being compact. So compact cities leave a much less ecological imprint than the cities with urban sprawl. So the cities in urban sprawl, we can see this with disurbanization in Budapest especially. This is one of the biggest examples. And the compact socialist cities, they weren't planned with so much, unfortunately, until the 80s. They weren't planned with so much climate change in mind. But they were planned according to a lot of progressive thinking and research that was ingrained in urban theory. And so to come maybe just to another 2 points, I think that it had been obvious to the political and academic elites already in the 70s that there is a climate crisis. And I know for a fact that a part of the Yugoslav parliament was aware of this and also took public transport because of this and didn't go by car. But each time that a kind of the question of how to plan this solution was mentioned, especially in 1972 during the energy crisis, basically the majority didn't find this interesting. So the oldest, I would say, civic society institutions dealing with it, the civic society organizations dealing with it in Yugoslavia are from the late 70s, early 80s, and this is something that you can dig in. And also just a quick reference with regards to how the European environmental movement might differ from other movements. I would say that now the division is not between East and West, and might have never been, but between the central capitalist society, the central capitalist in states, and the peripheral ones, because the peripheral ones are increasingly being used as dumping sites and as places of colonial exploitation. And with that in mind, this is something that we all have in common, be it different issues, and the other things are really, really, really specific. What we don't care about, none of us, is polyfluoroalkyl substances. So this is all the rage in Western Europe. This is what the French environmentalists are fighting against, because they don't have a lot of problems, but because they had a bit more time to organize things.
You can keep the mic. We might get several of them. Thank you. And I'm glad that this language of sort of core and periphery also enters our discussion. And I tend to be the one who brings it in. So I'm glad it also came in. And it's also kind of interesting to see this shift, because also between core and periphery, if you see with certain extractive industries, actually, it's not only the periphery and the semi-periphery, but also certain core areas are now shifting. If you look at sort of like this onshoring of lithium mining even, or of like extractive industries. So I think indeed you are right that this is probably a better framing to understand these global processes of between core and periphery and how these align with each other and how these might shift. I have more questions in this section, but if anyone wants to speak to this, I will not keep you. And maybe moving, and thank you for this was fascinating. Maybe moving into the more contemporary question as well, is that I think what is something that we can also observe, that even sort of like authoritarian or right-wing governments sort of are dovetailing on this green transition boom, and they are trying to sort of carve a way into this. And you see this also, I can give you, to make this a bit more specific, I can give you a Hungarian example. The Hungary now is on the path to become basically the electric battery factory of Europe ultimately.
But that's what Vučić says about Serbia as well. Like, yeah, I wonder how true all of this is and how many contracts are being put in place.
Yeah.
No, I get that, but he says he's doing it in Serbia as well.
Yeah. So there's like already many of them being built. Many of them like are already functioning and planned. And if there's like even a national battery strategy. So, and then we can discuss as to how much of this will materialize and where else this happens. And I would love to hear from you as well. But what I wanted to say with this primarily, that this is also framed as something that will benefit the Hungarian populace, that this will be sort of like an economic boom, and this will create new employment opportunities. And actually, this is the discursive framing of it, that this is what the government's doing, and it's also in a light of tackling climate change. But if you actually scratch the surface a little bit, what you really see is local communities actively organizing against this, and you see hundreds of environmental issues already of batteries being discarded in places, poisoning rivers, poisoning soil, and you see massive labor issues And yeah, you can see, I mean, I will not go more into the Hungarian context, but also Hungary's sort of, despite the rhetoric on migration, actually there's a lot of third world laborers who come in to work in these factories. So what I wanted to say, or what I wanted to ask maybe, is how do you see this like green pivot of authoritarian right-wing regimes affecting environmental mobilization in your own context, or if anyone wants to speak to that. So how do you maybe even counter that when there's this like narrative of this is being done in the name of tackling climate change, when indeed it might not be the case?
I mean, you look at me, but I don't think that Vučić is a right-wing politician. I think he's a neoliberal who uses cartel-like tactics. I don't think he's right-wing at all. I think he uses nationalism, and he kind of appeals to the right in Serbia, but he's privatizing the country. These are not, this is very not right-wing. This is not a guy he uses the rhetoric of our country, our Serbia, etc., but he's privatizing the country to the, the highest bidder or the lowest bidder sometimes. So I don't feel able to kind of discuss that in terms of any other context other than the rhetoric of his politics, you know what I mean? Maybe Szikra can talk about that, but...
The mic. Okay. Okay, maybe...
I just think it's like really important for us to define what we mean by right-wing and left-wing. I think it's super important for us to define that, even in this conversation in the context of this, because actually the environmental movement has a huge leg of right-wingers who do want to protect the environment. And I think until we start discussing that unity or conversation between these so-called factions who actually have more in common than elitists, and it's interesting to me that on this pamphlet, and I understand it was written with the most amazing intentions, it's a beautiful pamphlet, but elitism is not mentioned. All that on the pamphlet for the, on this book, it's like the pamphlet discusses right and left as enemies, but it doesn't discuss elitism and classism, right? It's really interesting to me, and I think it'd be really good for us to sort of define what we see as right and left in the environmental movement, because sometimes we get very confused.
I take your point on board. I think I asked the question in the sense of like, yeah. Sure, I think my question was mostly geared at authoritarian regimes, but then we can also argue about that, whether which of the regimes we live under can be classified as authoritarian. I think that's equally divisive. So you picked up on the right wing, but I think even actually it's an important point, I think, in the light of this conference, that of course these like polarities between right and left have shifted, and Orbán's like a case in point of this. Because what he's employing as tactics in terms of like economic governance, in terms of certain policies, it doesn't neatly align with what you could term like a classic, indeed, as you say, right and left division. Yeah. So I think I would just like to steer us on to, I think, yeah. So maybe if anyone wants to speak to this, then we can.
I'll kidnap the stage. Thanks. I think that we should distinguish perhaps what left and right, what kind of left, in what aspect do we talk about left and right? In this case, I think he's really right-wing because it's right-wing economic politics. I think that authoritarian leaders such as Vučić and Orbán are catering to the demands of the capitalist economy and capitalist corporations, which are presented as the saviors of the world. And this is like the same rhetorics of trickle-down capitalism that we used to hear, like for the last 40 years. Like it's going to be good. Just let the rich get their riches, and then you will have your housing. So like let the rich get their free air, and then we can talk about your agriculture and your sustenance. This has been also presented to Serbia in a very colonial fashion by different EU representatives coming and saying that Europe needs Serbia's lithium, and either European Union takes it or the Chinese take it, and you choose like who will rape you. And that's not the talk that we want to. That's not the discussion that we want to engage in. And that's also something that a lot of different social groups, particularly in Serbia, don't trust for a variety of reasons. It's also so those who are engaged in research know that this doesn't work. that we have been spending more like globally. So the corporations have been spending more and more resources, and the spending of resources tripled in the last 35 years, whereas the population only doubled. And it will triple again until 2050. With this green transition done as it is now, or without it. With the with the green transition done in the manner which in the route that it had taken so far, it will get even worse. So even more energy and resources, so basically natural goods, will be plundered and spent for the business as usual, laissez-faire, laissez-passer, which is really right-wing, and unless we change the economy in its course, so change the expending part of the economy and change the way these resources are being distributed and used. And it's also really important to mention that the efficiency of resource use has fallen down in the last 25 years. So the talk about technology saving the world is also flaw, and so now when we can maybe move to particular struggles or something, because in that respect things are really different. What we don't have all the answers. We know that everybody has to go through green transition in one way or another, but this way that they are taking is not the way. And it's really interesting in Serbia that the people, including the people with politically right-wing views, Serbia. It's interesting because Serbia has been criticized a lot in the 19th century and the early 20th century for having egalitarian economic views. It was considered peasant, and also for having an anti-industrialism, so anti-modernism, and this is also where these things come apart. And it is difficult, and it is really important to set these things, analyze them, and realize how to go further, how to maybe say, okay, we as the ancestors of the progressives of the middle 20th century might have been wrong, and maybe we really didn't need this much industry as the people from the villages told them like years and decades ago, and now we need to take a common stance. But I just need to say something about Margaret Thatcher. I asked a friend of mine from Britain when I had some friends from Britain in Belgrade when the day that she died, and I asked so what do you think of Margaret Thatcher? And this friend was like, I'm from Sheffield. And that's all you need to know.
Yeah, she's no friend of the miners, isn't she?
Yeah, that's right. But we really, if we want to do something with the mining industry in the Balkans, in Poland, in Czech Republic, we also have to think about the miners. Thanks.
I think Christina's sitting on the edge of her seat at this question. Or do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I wanted to add something to the lithium thing, but no more Margaret Thatcher, if that's okay. I think I'm done with that. I thought that was really important what you said, Lily, that when we're talking about lithium, and this is also connected to the Czech Republic, where it's becoming an issue also, and there is a local struggle also. So it's to highlight the low quality of the work that it's actually bringing, and these are not good jobs, these are not safe jobs, and it's all false. And I think pretty recently has our government started to greenwash. No, we haven't really gone to the greenwashing phase yet. They didn't bother greenwashing until very recently. So the good part of this is that they're beginners at greenwashing. There's still a lot of stuff that they're saying that doesn't make any sense, and that are pretty easily to contradict. So we have to find these things and contradict them actively. But also what I think is important in the cases as lithium and as other mining communities in general is and this doesn't also go for the other side, this goes for our side and for our movement also. It's time that we start to treat the people that live in the areas affected by this as actual experts, because we very often we write articles, we organize conferences, we make documentaries, and we ask everybody else. We ask everybody from a different university who has done anything ever connected to mining, but we don't ask the locals. We don't invite them, and we don't treat them as experts. And there's nobody with a better expertise on this than the people actually living there and resisting it. So I think like that's like the first point of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, but we have to also accept that a lot of those experts are right-wingers, and we have to talk to them. You know, so this is super important, and if we're talking at a panel and it's called Left Lab, this is really great because we've got to open these discussions with these people. The amazing thing about Serbia, and something that let me just backtrack, because you did ask a question about the battery stuff. And look, the Critical Raw Materials Act, which is adopted by the European Parliament in March of this year, is a law that basically legalizes more mining. And it allows for European taxpayer euros, to be, used and given to mining companies and extractors in the public interest and strategic interest. And the weird thing about this law is that it's a green law, but the only entities that support this law are government, mining companies, and the space and military industries, right? And banks, of course, banks. But yeah, but they'd support anything they make their money from. So it just happens to be these things right now. And so this law is supposed to be the green law. The Green Party voted for it, members of the left voted for it, members of the far right voted for it, but a lot of members of the far right also voted against it. And so this is why I keep bringing these, and I always get like, Bojana, stop saying that. It's like, no, these are the absolute conversations that we have to have, because we can't choose the people who own the land we're protecting, particularly in spaces where land is privatized, and it is right now. Do you know what I mean? So this is why I'm so keen to ask you questions about your parents and like what they do, how they do it, why they're so good at it, how they organize. Obviously, we don't need to like.
That's very different. Like,
I don't know whether what they do
about climate.
But what we have in Serbia is this incredibly special, unique movement that I haven't seen anyone talk about anywhere else. And it doesn't mean that like I'm besties with the Chetniks, who joined the Nazis, by the way, if you don't know the history. And that's also, they dispute that constantly. But it does mean that I share a tent with a woman who makes rakia and makes cheese, and we share a tent for 5 days, and she proclaims herself as a right-winger, and I say you're a feminist, because one day, when you die, people will be studying the history of your life in feminist classes, because you're a woman on a farm, writing poetry, being banned from schools because of your poetry, because of your political stances against lithium. I mean, this is crazy stuff, and then you have members of Iskra's group speaking to her and saying, hey, some of the speeches you say, like you start them, and you start them like some Chetnik leaders, just maybe don't do that, and like discussing with her why that might be a problem for some people and why that might divide people and might make the people think the movement's a bit far right, or it's going to the right, or it's, and this dialogue is incredible. So, and this is really hard to do. It's really fucking hard to do. I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes I want to kill people. But sometimes I want to like literally kill people who are on my political spectrum and my side of it, because they're being chauvinist, or they're being sexist, or they're being misogynist. So in a way, I don't know, like we've bonded, I'm like kind of taking this into a more social and sort of part of the stuff, but we've bonded with people I never thought that I would be friends with. And we've opened up conversations interpersonally. The movement itself, and this is a really important agreement between every single person who is part of the movement genuinely. So there are definitely right-wingers who stand on the environmental movement and say shit at protests that is absolutely inappropriate, and they get reprimanded. But the movement itself, the individuals that are central to this movement have all agreed we do not discuss these things publicly. Like, we do not stand at protests and say, we hate this group of people or that group of people. And in fact, what started to happen is that the Chetnik woman starts to talk about religious equality and, it's just this incredible kind of stuff that's going on. And I just think that the interpersonal dialogue is sort of as important as the overall organizational element, and it's really, really hard. It's really hard.
You want to back to the question. In the case of Orban or the Orban regime, I just can't see a green pivot or a green transition. It's not about being greener or having a sustainable economy. It's just about surfing on the global economic waves. It's about grabbing a position in the geopolitical games. So they are totally they don't have a credibility in these topics. They don't believe in green issues or the need for green transition. They are confused and they really lack of authenticity. So I don't think that it could stop us in any of our struggles but at all. We should reflect on that because they are just pretty weak on this topic.
So I think what stands out from all these diverse comments is this question of sort of likely and unlikely coalitions that you face on an interpersonal level. Because in my mind, preparing for this workshop, I think what I thought of is that you all come from very different backgrounds and you operate on different scales and you operate on it's a very site-specific struggle. But then it ties to other things, and some was engaged in institutional politics. But maybe we can also merge this conversation with, okay, there are other coalitions that emerge in the process that you're doing. So maybe, if we can all, or if you could all speak to a bit of this, how do you then, with concrete examples in your own cases, in the struggle that you engaged in, how does this coalition building work? So you all spoke a bit to this, what sort of challenges do you encounter? If there's anything that pops to mind that you'd really like to talk about, and then we can take these discussions on right-wing parents further over a drink later. I think many of us can also speak to that. From your own position, how do you see this question of coalition building? And to some of you, I think the other question also is for instance, from the outset, it seems that Rio Tinto, for instance, is a site-specific struggle. But I imagine you connect it to larger national politics. And also Rio Tinto is a global company who's doing this in many, many other places. So if you could all speak to this also from your own point of view, or in the case of Hungary, that, okay, this is sort of a gloss or this strategy, but then how do you oppose it? How do you create a different narrative around this? Because it's clearly, of course, it's about accumulation in the case of the Orbán regime, but how do you effectively organize against this? So I hope asking this question of coalition building and what do you encounter, maybe you can all speak to this from your own position. And I don't know who wants to go ahead, maybe this side. Yeah, please go.
I remember that last year or 2 years ago, I met some people who were organizing the tenants in Berlin to the referendum. I cannot pronounce the name of the German organization because it's... What?
Yeah, I think Enteignen is true.
Yeah. That's what I mean, sorry. And I remember that they said that when they were building this huge coalition that ended up doing this great thing, that they had specific people that were designed because the rest of the organization knew that they could speak to somebody who's racist and is okay with that. They're calm enough and kind of not influenced by it enough so they could talk to a racist. And then they had to different people who could handle different stuff, and they managed to build a super diverse coalition that had immigrants in it and also people who were kind of racist. But they all managed to have this one shared goal, and it was a huge success from my point of view as on the organization level. So, but I thought this was a fascinating story, but to my work, it doesn't really relate because for example, when we're organizing with tenants from the ex-miner communities or from people from coal regions or something, I very often find out we have more in common than with a common city liberal person. So it's not really an issue. And also the thing is I don't know if this is a wider thing or something, but from my experience, it's mostly women being involved in these struggles, and I just feel we share a lot because there's a shared experience with this. So the coalition building isn't that it's not such a.
Well, maybe if I could ask a question that I think in this, so you're working with specific coal mining regions, then is maybe a question of how to sort of scale this up and make this issue matter to outside of that community.
Yes, please tell me. I wouldn't know. Like we try. Yeah. So ask somebody who's maybe more successful.
Would you like to jump in at this point?
I'll jump in. Yeah, I'll jump in because when you talk about coalition building, I really do feel like the coalition building happens from, like, there's so many levels to it, right? There's political coalitions, there's social coalitions, there's movement coalitions, there's national, international, local there's so many different facets. But the first thing that comes to mind right now, because I've been doing this specific project for 4 years, is like the coalition built between the core team is so crucial because our mental health is shot. Like, it is hard to build coalitions with people who have different political ideologies and different levels of wealth, different levels of class. Like, we also have that in different academic learnings, very, very different understandings of even what the history of our country is, what the history of our ethnicity is, what our culture is based on, what it's not based on. And I really do, like, I don't really share about this, but I think I'm going to have to because it's a really young audience. Like, the first time that we formed SEOS, I moderated this meeting where, like, all these different groups from local Serbian groups got together. I had met them all and introduced them all from, I was in Melbourne, Australia, and they were in Serbia. And they all lived like 2 hours from each other, but I was in Australia. And so I came back to Belgrade and we had this meeting. And it was so stressful that I had the biggest panic attack in the middle of this meeting and started crying and could not stop crying. And they hate it when people cry. They can't fucking stand it. And it took about a month to build. They thought that I was being manipulative or something. I just had a panic attack because it was so stressful speaking to all these different people and trying to have them not fight and, and then letting them fight and then listening to the fight and thinking this is all going to fall apart and we're not going to make it work and Rio Tinto's going to come here and burn everything, And it was like, this is what coalition building is. Like, it's not like, oh, we're going to sing Kumbaya together and we're all going to talk about ideologies and you're going to convince someone of something. It's like making these spaces where people can fight, share, talk, and actually holding that space. And it's really, really taxing and really stressful for everyone involved. And it was amazing to watch this sort of umbrella of, like, local group then, but themselves come to terms with their own differences, not on that day, but even just later, and kind of having this stance of, this is the aim. And I know of stories where, like, different farmers have to, like, stop other farmers from going to, like, the anti-gay march or like being seen with the anti-immigrant guy because one guy is anti-immigrant, but the other guy understands that he shouldn't be, but then his wife is totally left. And so there's all these kind of, like, and watching them and understanding, like, how their communities are changing because of it. And, so yeah, coalition building on that level is, like, really interesting. And then there's also the international stuff. Like, we have coalitions with a lot of different groups, a lot of, sometimes institutions, but we're a bit not so. Institutional coalitions are a little bit, sometimes they can be in favor of, the company stuff because the companies can always kind of get information. So yeah, we do have really amazing, we had this signing of the other declaration, which was this declaration that we started, and it involves, like, Serbia, Spain, Bosnia, different places that are in danger of being mined by lithium. And Chile and now Argentina, because I just went to Argentina recently, so, like, they're going to, Portugal. Yeah, thank you. She knows more than I do, and I signed it. Yeah, that's true. So we do have, and then sometimes that coalition is just about support, and other times it's about writing a letter to Ursula von der Leyen and saying we hate the CRMA and having 300, signatories from 35 different countries sign that letter, and other times it's about creating groups, that do certain things, and sometimes it's just about checking in and seeing how people are depending on their capacities. So, but the one thing that I've noticed about the coalition stuff is that it's making people like Vučić and authoritarian governments and companies very scared. They can't find a leader to arrest. They can't find an organisation that's at the centre of it. And they can't figure out how to infiltrate us by making us fight because we already do. This, like, right? They're shocked that Serbians are, like, getting along and being able to, like, really, like, unify on this level because they definitely know how much we fight, and we fight a lot. you know.
Yeah,
They still can't beat us. So it's like really, it's really
I think that resonates in Hungary as well, that Orban's deadly scared of any organizing that might not be a direct threat to his power, but it's not something that you can put your finger on so easily. So, and yeah, thank you also to speaking to this sort of interpersonal micro scale of coalition building, because it's not all signing papers together and having a monthly meeting, that indeed this is the nitty-gritty every day impacting your life kind of thing. So, and I think you want to say...
Interrupt if it's about Margaret Thatcher. No.
She's banned now, she's banned.
First a Western leader that spoke about climate change at the UN.
Oh, and then all the problem list was amazing, and then the solutions were terrible. But she was. Fortunately, this squeeze really terrible.
So anything apart from Margaret Thatcher, please.
Yeah, definitely. Like 10 years ago, we were devastated and tried to warn that we will lose all of the abstract stuff that nobody is guarding, like the public space, which had been dubbed no one's, and like the public housing, which has been dubbed like it belongs to no one, etc., etc. And especially the fine-tuned institutions that had been forged throughout the 50s and the 60s, especially, and that had been there for the people, enabling like a civilized existence, and which nobody thought that could just go away or be taken away. So for a large portion of time, it's only been the political scientists and like the former left defending these abstract institutions, and we warn that we will come at a moment where things are being like robbed taken literally from our hands, and the soil will be taken from our feet. And unfortunately, this is the moment that we find ourselves in. And this is like Nokia connecting people, violence connecting people in this particular case. So this is the violence that a lot of different social, economic, and whatever groups feel on their skin. And this is why we are in such an interesting political situation now in Serbia. Please watch the news if you don't have enough anxiety. Because for a long time, I don't know how long, we hadn't had this kind of an agreement between, the different fractions of the society, like the scientists also agreeing with the agriculture, what to do, and I don't know, the political left and the political right agreeing, though I think a lot of research needs to be done about the economic views of these particular groups, because I don't think that a lot of people from the villages that we work with are really on the economic right, and that they are that they would vote for a new feudal society that we are now. They don't think that in Serbia, even being really rich had been studied, and it's been thought of as a stigma, as a sign of robbery, as a sign of plunder. So this is also something to think about.
I had many more questions prepared also on kind of things, but I think we are running out of time, and you cite 10 minutes until the questions. Okay, so maybe, because I think I had a question prepared for Bence as well, that I can bring in at this point, that we have all of you engaging in sort of grassroots organizing, but I would also like to hear about sort of the vantage point of institutional politics. And recently I read an interview with you after you became an independent MP, in which you say that your former party has maybe not been so successful in like linking their politics and agenda with a sort of grassroots movement. And instead of discussing this in detail, which we can again do later probably, I would like to ask you, like, how do you see this maybe working better, like how to link a green agenda in a Hungarian context with grassroots politics? If you could speak to this.
Yeah, maybe I would connect these two last questions, because
please.
I just wanted to speak about the coalition building, and I have two pretty interesting case studies. Somehow all of us is linked to mines and miners. I'm, by the way, a member of the miners' trade union, and why not? I'm not a miner. I don't have it. No. It's a honorary membership, something like that. They like me for some reason. I don't know.
A lot to discuss over beer tomorrow evening, I think. Okay.
Don't care. But
And then from like you have to earn like $30,000 and then you cut it in like, gee,
sorry. I can't bring it in. But we have two different stories concerning mines and opening or reopening mines. One is happening in Recsk, Heles country, which is a pretty poor part of the country, and the other one is located in Csobanka, which is close to Budapest, a pretty nice village and full of well-educated, middle-class people. So, if you want to build a coalition, you need someone or some groups, some communities to build a coalition with. And in Recsk, there was literally not no one, but one guy who was our guide, who was a gatekeeper, who was an informant, but there was no one who would stand up and voice against this mine, because it affected the poorest part of the village. The Roma community lived there, and no one really cared about them. Single guys from Budapest like me, from different Green parties, went there and tried to do something and tried to look smart and be brave and tough, but practically we resulted zero. But the other case, Csobanka, it's probably going to be a huge success. We can block this reopening of this pretty dangerous mine. It's not about the mine itself, but whatever. But it's because there's dozens of very conscious, very well organized, really empowered citizens there. There's a lot of NGOs there and in the neighborhood, which are also affected, and we can cooperate with them pretty well. So the secret is you have to be there, but we are not there, and not just us, the Green parties, but not a single party except Fidesz. In Hungary, there's zero organization level of the opposition parties, and probably this roots back in the past, so I wouldn't explain it, but I think that we have a lot of given factors, and yes, it's good when you have someone to cry with and to conflict with, but at least you have someone to cooperate.
So there's a lot like they can just if there's small. Can you hear me? He take the jet.
You can't really, this is better, right? Because you can't really hear yourself anyway. So I think, what was I going to say? There's no silver bullet to this community building, but maybe like what sort of conclusions can you withdraw like moving forward? So you had these experiences, some of them were successful, some of them less successful. So how do you see the role of sort of like an MP like yourself or institutional politicians in sort of what part can you take, and how do you engage with people that are actually on the ground, as you say, because that's what you need. Indeed, you need like a community. So how do you see these things merging, or how do you see maybe working better in the future? I know this is a...
You have to educate the whole society. You have to have working local communities. You cannot build something from scratch or from nothing. It's not a big deal to find those people who are committed, who are empowered, who have the skills, who have their networks. It's okay if we have them. And we know our job, how to bring into the institutional system of the politics. But we need a totally different society. So we have to work on it. And not change them, but help them to have all those tools, what they need to be able to represent themselves in public discourses and to be able to fight for their interests. So simple, but I think that these Eastern European societies have a lot in common, and it is super familiar what you have just said about what are the
Specificities, it's a one.
in the Eastern European countries. And lately I'm thinking around if we Hungarians are Slavic people or not. My favorite Facebook page is...
Very controversial topic.
Do you know spotting Slavs in tracksuits? That's an ingenious, yeah. So probably we have something in common in our history, in our culture, and in our approaches at individual and interpersonal level as well.
I think on this panel, I didn't have on my bingo Margaret Thatcher being mentioned 7 times, nor squatting Slavs, so I guess this was a bit unexpected. And yes, maybe because we were talking about this, like, again, this like sort of community building and participatory processes, and I think Christina, if you could again, because also it was like mentioned already, like how this, like, because your work with coal mining communities, it really seems to actually enact this rather than this like EU checkbox of you need to do 50 meetings in which you involve the community. So maybe if you could speak to how this experience is, or what things worked for you, or anything that's like pops to mind on this. How
like
do we
community building?
Yeah, and how do you involve the community in like mobilizing for a cause, and like how do you link it to other issues, and how does this work for you?
Okay, so the 3 steps to build a community.
Yes, in the last 5 minutes of this panel.
Eastern Europe.
And my pep talk is here.
No, it's just like I don't want to take credits for something I haven't done. So like what I'm gonna talk about now is like was done by different people in my organization, but I didn't participate in it. And like that was like the first just before like when the whole process of just transition was starting. And the fund was still getting talked about and stuff like this. One of the first things that people from our organization did was that they took bikes and they went around the coal regions, actually like organizing like debates and talking to the people and like organizing the participation about the future of the region that the government and the European Union didn't do. And from like these conversations, they have prepared some suggestions on what to do for the region and how to support it. And of course, there were like environmental stuff and stuff that were connected to work, but also like stuff that like were maybe not directly seen as a work on participation. That is, for example, like private debt collectors, because a lot of these, and the canceling of private debt collectors, because a lot of these regions are like highly in debt, and like of course you're not gonna participate in politics if you like have so much more on your plate. So all of these like economic issues that can lead to a society where people can actually participate and can take decisions, and like where they can have some trust that if they voice their like wish for their region or something, it's actually gonna be heard, which is also like unless people have this experience, they're not gonna like participate just to have a vision or like something like this. So first there has to be some like at least little cases where the participation worked, and also there has to be like economically relief so people could actually have the time for it. So that's, I think, it.
Yeah, this is incredible. Yeah, no, I just looked around. No, but this is truly incredible because you often see that this kind of work is done by other entities. Like, for instance, if you look at, I can give a personal example. I will be doing research in an East German region, and there, the entity that really listens to the people is the AfD, which is the far-right party, and no wonder it's popular, and it's like sort of, and I think local people, I've been told in multiple occasions that are actually like really resent this notion that this AfD problem is pinned onto them, where it's obviously way more global and on a European scale it's way more prevalent. But the AfD is probably the only entity that actually goes and talks to the people and tries to represent their interest. And you can say, well, represent or kind of mobilizes this like sense of abandonment of people. So it's like incredible to hear examples where it's not necessarily a far-right party doing this, but actually people who cycle across the region and talk to the ex-miners.
Yeah, and like recently when we were like resisting the evictions of the ex-miners, I think that wasn't like, some of these people wouldn't really be like close to us or something, in the sense that they would never like ask us for help or find us out. But like honestly, we were the only ones talking to them, and to them like, and even like stuff like this. No, this is like an international meeting that's like so like normal to part of us. Like we've been to international meetings. We do think of ourselves as a part of like a movement that goes beyond our borders. But a lot of people from like communities affected by mining or something, they don't have this sense of doing something. And even just like a small thing as like letting like inviting these people somewhere, or like having these people as speakers or something, letting them like feel that they are actually part of a global movement, it can do a lot for like their involvement and for the communities getting built and stuff like this. I don't know.
How are we on time? Maybe if I can ask you, Lo, who's looking at me. So meaning we have 10 minutes? Okay, so I think I don't want to do a fake, happy, optimistic ending, but what you ended on with, I think was quite nice to end this part of the panel. And now we can also, unless someone has a closing word, I won't stop you. You have an anecdote. Okay, then maybe let's listen to your anecdote. And then in the meantime, if I could ask two people from Szikra, or one person from Szikra, to pick up one of these mics for the audience question, or this one? Okay, then I pass the mic on to you.
I'll keep talking about the people and the participation, because that's what we've been focusing on, and hopefully in another panels we will see what the political parties are doing, and they're doing shit. But my anecdote is at least optimistic. But so back in 2012, a small village in Montenegro tried to fight against the government for their clear air and soil and water, because they were victims of an illegal dumping site to which even the medical stuff went. And they formed this is one of the first like environmental movements in the Balkans. So they like formed the road blockades and lay in front of the trucks and stuff like that. And they were really pissing the government off, and then they realized, and it's Montenegro, so it's really like conservative, and then they realized that there will be pride in the capital city of Podgorica, and they found a rainbow flag somewhere, and they hung it out, and they say, okay, we're with the LGBT, but it's some godforsaken part of the country. But what they actually felt, it didn't stay like on the surface of their minds. It wasn't just a political trick, but they realized that they had a common enemy, and they started thinking about the similarities and the shared problems and possibly the shared values with the members of another oppressed group.
Does this work? Yes. Well, thank you for that. And with that, I hand over to the audience. So if you have a question, please put your hand up, and Yulo will find you with the mic. And this could be addressed to the whole panel. If it's like specifically to someone, maybe please do say that to whom your question is addressed. And please don't be shy if you have any questions. Just raise your hand. I know this is the first panel and we'll warm up, but we're all very friendly here. Everybody's tired. Yeah, should have done a round of exercises at the beginning of this panel for everyone. Okay.
I can ask a question.
You have a question? Please go ahead.
Okay, because I was thinking about something that all of you kind of touched at some point, is I think the discrepancy between what we would like to have as a green transition and what we have as an offer right now, and how that offer is not really satisfying to a lot of people who are precarious workers. And it's very, very hard to have them commit to this cause, not only because they don't have the time, which is also completely true, or they don't have the energy, or we don't have the energy, but also because what we are offering to them is bullshit. What we are offering is, buy a Tesla and it's going to be better for the environment, or how about you don't take your car and we have public transport, but actually it takes twice as long because we haven't invested in it in 10 years. So my question, I think, is how do we change the offer that we have so that we can actually get people on the side? Thank you.
Tough one. Anyone wants to, but a very good one, thank you. Anyone wants to chip in?
But it's been done. Is this one working? Yeah,
all of
but
them, I think.
It's actually kind of been done before. It's not like there wasn't Bretton Woods after the Second World War, with like people sitting down and saying, oh God, this kind of a messy circulation of capital, of financial capital in the interwar period really made the crisis come so soon, and now we're going to restrict the circulation of capital to make this economy maybe last longer in stability. So this is now we're being conservative because we're trying to find our legitimacy in the past and not in the future. But still, there must be a lot of methods and models from the heterodox economy which we can popularize as much as we've been popularizing other stuff that we're acquainted with, to also to work together with the people who just feel that this kind of neoliberal globalization that we're still going through is not doing them good and is not doing their environment good. So this kind of I think Bauman's human consequence of globalization came out 25 years ago or something. That's quarter of a century. And it's been obvious that it will come to this. So if it has been obvious, we should listen to the heterodox economists and see how we can change that part of the economy so that we don't waste this much resources. And I don't think that degrowth is the only way to go, but there should be a larger debate on this. Also, which people working in agriculture can take part in. It just needs to be somehow. It's heavy. It's heavy load, but we have to do it if we want to survive.
You wanted to chip in?
Yeah. Do we have an offer? I mean, probably we have at the policy level, but in politics, if you want to have an offer, you have to be relevant. We are not, and we have to regain our relevance, at least in Hungary. So I think the first job is to create something which has the critical mass, and later on we can see what will be our pretty and convincing and attractive offer about the equitable or just green transition.
Anyone else to this question?
Yeah, I honestly, I love talking. I'm a big talker, and this panel has been wonderful. But as soon as I heard about the battery factories, I was wondering what we're doing sitting here and not sitting in the dark discussing how to sabotage them. I really think a lot of our focus, for me personally, I love being here, don't get me wrong. It's fun talking. But really, I don't think we're aggressive enough. I don't think we've redefined violence. I think we accept too much violence. And I don't think that we take enough risks and in action. I think we're busy being right and not being free and not being, winning. And I think that there's a real kind of politeness because we are right. Sorry, but we are. it's apparent to me, and that's great, and that righteousness is so wonderful, and it fills my heart, and it fills my heart that there's a room full of people who are right and righteous and on the left, and it's just amazing, but we're not aggressive enough. And I think we've been pacified a lot, way too much, and I recommend, thinking about that some more. No, I don't. Like direct action, and not even direct action, but actually civil disobedience and acts of sabotage, I think, are really the solution. Of course, other things have to be done at the same time, but I don't think we have enough real, proper, damage of infrastructures that are absolutely ruining our lives.
For a second, I thought you were going to recommend how to blow up a pipeline, but I think... Well, it's a book originally. But anyways, I think maybe to hark back to Yulo's question, who I think also wants to ask a follow-up, but I think I don't disagree with you in saying that is also, of course, a path of action and direct action, but I think then it kind of loops back to a question that who is able to participate in this current society, because that kind of risk, very few people are really seriously able to take on. So I think maybe, I don't know if I'm asking your... Yeah, if I'm asking Yulo's a follow-up question for her, I give the mic back to you.
No, I mean, that's obviously a huge part of it, but I think also something that I was trying to think about is more, yes, we can sabotage, and yes, we can think of things that we don't want, but I also think that we need to think about the things that we do want that seem somehow achievable in the societies that we live in, accepting the realities of global capitalism, that of course we have to think about changing, but at the same time trying to be quick thinking about what we can do right now, which is proactive in the sense of not only resisting certain things, even though resistance has to be done as well, obviously, but especially because I think, and this is what's really tricky, and I think you try to allude to it, Lily, with your question about Orban and the lithium and the green transition issue, because basically if you go there as a green resistant movement, there's a very easy throwback of but we are participating in the green transition. What we are doing right, you can't resist this as someone fighting for climate justice, because this is part of climate justice, because we are building reusable batteries.
Yeah, but lithium is not a replacement for oil. Lithium is, there's so many, these are all really easy intellectual arguments to make, I think, and I can give you a list of them. This is not a problem. I think the bigger scope of the problem is that we're getting caught up in the rhetoric of business, in the rhetoric of capitalism, and fighting them on their own turf. And I think this is a huge waste of your intelligence and our intelligence. This idea that we're going to prove to the occupier or fascists that somehow we're right and they need to change their minds. I just don't think they are. And until we affect their money, until the money and power is all these people, they don't care about our lives. Honestly, Orban, Vučić, these are really serious things. In Latin America, there's ongoing genocide of societies that are looking after land. They don't care about human life. So I think until there's a sorry, I think you want to say something.
Yeah, just because I'm not I don't want to convince the elites. I don't want to convince.
I'm not fighting. I'm just talking to you. I'm Serbian.
No, my idea is not to try to convince the ruling class to try to destroy itself. My idea is to try to convince the precarious workers and the working class in the broadest sense to be for the green transition in a way that is also overarching and, let's say, necessarily anti-capitalist in that sense.
Okay, this is really, I guess there's a question for everyone. Who do you want to convince? The people that are completely brainwashed and do not believe that the climate crisis exists? Who is it that you want to convince? And why do you need them? I guess that's the question. What do you need them for?
I think in order to build the resistance and build the movement, we need people. At least in Hungary, Bence was alluding to this, we don't even have any people resisting. No, that's not true. For the battery factories, we have people resisting, but you know what I mean? If you want to build a mass movement, you need the mass. So, and that mass is not the ruling class.
But I think you build it, and this is Field of Dreams, Hollywood. You build it, and they will come. This is how honestly, this was a really big conversation that we had in the beginning of the Marcia Drine, the whole thing and popularizing this. It really was. We just do our own work. We look after our community. We preserve what we hold dear, right? Whether that's the community, the land, whatever that is. And I'll tell you, maybe a concrete example of something that we did that really worked was that So we build this thing, right? We build the themes. We really take care of, you know, our campaign. And then when someone calls, we talk to them about what we do. And what ended up happening was there was a law that the government was presenting on expropriation, and it wouldn't have changed anything to do with Rio Tinto's rights, because lithium is of national interest, so you can expropriate based on that. But the law itself would have completely changed the rights of everybody else. And so we all, like everyone within the movement, just went, this is the legalization of colonization, and that is how we're going to, you know, promote this. And everyone just started writing letters, writing articles, whatever needed to be done, Facebook posts, political requests. I don't even know what they're called. You know, where you go to Parliament and you give a request for change of law or the dismissing of the law, a motion. Thank you. And we had a week where every group had planned something, and then there was this whole thing of like, everyone's planned something, we should do things together. And a lawyer basically contacted all of us and said, I think you guys should just don't cancel anything, please. I respect all of you, stop fighting, just everybody have their thing on their day. And by, you know, on the first day there was like 10 of us, we had a meeting with the European ambassador, you know, it was just like so awesome talking to him. And then on the second day, there was a smaller protest with about 500 people. On the third day, there was 10,000 people. And then on the Saturday, there was blockades in, you know, 50 cities. And then the next week, because people had been beaten, so these are things that you can't control everything. Sometimes the world will give you this stuff. There was people beaten in one of the towns. The next week, there was 100,000 people all over the country blockading for an expropriation law that had nothing to do with Rio Tinto. So maybe that answers your question a bit better, but for us, really, it's like just taking care of our campaign, our community, and then making it open to everyone else, rather than trying to bring people. And if it's not bringing people, that's also okay. If it's important to you, you've got to take care of it. Otherwise, who will? It doesn't matter how big it is. Something will bite as long as everyone's kind of, you know, yeah, I really think something will bite. She's been working on a campaign probably for 10 years that I don't even know about. No, I'm serious, right? Absolutely. And that I don't even know about that. I didn't know about that. That people are like, what are you doing with Rio Tinto? There's so many other problems. Yeah, I know there's other problems, but this is also a problem. I'm doing this. Other people will do other things, and let's help each other out. So,
yeah, that's what we're here for, I think, ultimately. And Szikra would like to answer, and then just quickly before you do, are there any more pressing questions in the room? We're a little bit over time, but if someone... Okay, then maybe you go ahead, and then we'll see if someone gathers their courage.
Like a direct replica to that, yeah, I firmly believe that what's going on now in Serbia and possibly will go on in Bosnia-Herzegovina, because there had been similar problems there, and also we have coalitions, similar like different platforms, Balkan platforms of different organizations working together, is now something that has been forged in the last 10 years with different particular fights where people were protecting their environment or their livelihoods or their like more or less lives because they had to, and just a bit of a digression, I hate participation. I would prefer strong institutions. Like, I think that we're fighting we've been pushed into this situation. We've been stuffed with the ideas that we need to do things like this, and by the book of this liberal democracy for the periphery, and that we have to let go of all of our institutions that the West didn't let go of. Because we've been wrong and we've been reprimanded for this being wrong, like socialism supposedly wasn't efficient, but so much more was going on, including different pressures from the World Bank and the IMF, which we are not talking enough about. But still, so people had to fight. In the end, they had to fight for their livelihoods, and they had been fighting for some 10 to 15 years in different fights, and they have to rely on each other because one group has this expertise and the other has that. But what also contributed to this state of the movement in Serbia, which we are now praising, though we're actually, when you compare us to actually the corporations, we kind of resemble the knights, the saying "ni" from Monty Python sketch, like we will fight without our hands and even without our legs, but we will fight, with our nails, yeah. What contributed to this was partly the subconscious knowledge of the institutions that existed during socialism, particularly in Yugoslavia. So different forms of organizing, and also the fact that people in Serbia don't want to go to the European Union. And now, according to statistics, more than 50% of people don't want to join. And this is something that I don't know how to put it other than that is contributing actually to the framing of these mining projects and foreign direct investment projects as colonial. And this is probably something that we have in common with Hungary. For better or for worse, this is a kind of rhetorics that Orban has been using since he came to power. So yes, maybe this can be like used to your advantage. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. We won't be a colony. It's Orban's favorite phrase, indeed. Okay, but maybe let's not end on this note, probably. I would like to again ask, I know we're probably just about over time, and it's cold and you're tired, but if there's any questions in anyone, Prem?
Thank you all very much. This is not a super well-formed question, but I wanted to pick up on some of the things that some of you said, especially what Ben said earlier about the difficulty of organizing in a specific town because the people there didn't care about the poorest, who were Roma. And I'm interested if you could talk a little bit about environmental injustices, because I was quite environmental injustice as it exists in an everyday form. There are multiple numbers of people around Eastern and Central Europe who don't have access to the things that we take for granted, the clean water, etc., etc. And you mentioned, Lily, at the beginning that it's important to think about these issues intersectionally. So it's not just talking about environmental issues or about green transitions, but about how because of long histories of structural violence, there have been people who experience levels of deprivation such that participating or thinking about participating as political actors or organizers or participants in modes of rethinking environmental investments is beyond the pale. So, and I understand, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with focusing on, green transitions and fighting against lithium batteries, factories, but there's also deep-seated ongoing structural issues in Hungary, for sure, which is a place that I know better than other places, but also certainly in Serbia, which impact Roma and other racialized groups disproportionately. So, along with the thing I'm trying to say is, could you speak a little bit about intersections of environmental and racism as they play out in Central and Eastern Europe?
So who wants to go first? And I think maybe just and I hope everyone's all right extending the panel by this question. Just we'll stay a bit longer, and thank you for staying with us.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Probably we all more or less know the literature. I just want to add some field experience from Hungary. I have a feeling that this regime and those investors who are backed by this regime are just testing the local communities. And if they see some strong resistance, thank you, vive la resistance. So strong resistance, they finally maybe and sometimes move on and find another place. And that will result in that those who are have the burst capability to stand up for themselves will suffocate from these investments, from these industrial plants and things like that, mines, all of these things. So all of our successes comes from relatively wealthier and more advantageous villages and towns, parts of Hungary, and that's why I'm pretty glad when sometimes we can surprise ourselves and we can have some smaller successes in rural areas, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, like in Nógrád County, where we had a huge demonstration against the local battery factory, and it was closed temporarily, which is at least something. Yeah, but it's super rare.
Someone else wanted to answer this question?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about racism. So in Serbia, we have Bor, which is a 100-year-old copper mine, and every time that they expand the mine, it's the Roma community that gets moved first, and that never gets talked about. And unfortunately, my experience of kind of being involved in any of this stuff in Serbia is very new. It's for the last 5 years. I haven't really paid attention before from 96 to 97 when the demonstrations were on. But it was really interesting seeing like the police violence that happened in 2020 and people being shocked because they're used to police being nice to them. Seriously, we've got great relationships with the police. They're our friends. And they don't think about the fact that all they need to do is speak to the Roma kid on the corner and ask him or her about the relationship with the police, and they'll have a very different experience. And I unfortunately I don't see a change really in the social element of it, except for, people doing the good old racist thing of I have Roma friends, I'm not racist. This constantly happens. But there's an amazing group of young women who are called Roma Asvin in Serbia. And honestly, I speak to them quite a lot. We kind of involved them in the very beginning to discuss with them the climate, like the issue of climate crisis, issue of housing, all this stuff. They don't even have time to talk about it to an open door because they're focusing on education and, what they're focusing kind of on what they're doing. And I find it really disappointing. I find it really, really disappointing because I don't think that there's an awareness of the inherent racism. I think I've seen that across all of Europe. I don't know. I might be wrong. The conversation is really rare. There was one study in the last 5 years that I know of that was done regarding how the climate crisis will affect Roma in Serbia. And it wasn't that comprehensive, if I'm honest. I don't have a good answer. Except for I do believe that there is absolutely entities that are aware, that there is absolutely conversation and collaboration happening, but it's a very minor group of people. Is that
maybe?
Yeah. I would say that it's mostly the NGOs who are dealing with human rights, who try to help the Roma people either through institutions or by field work, and write about how they had been affected also during COVID, which came because of climate change and lack of access to infrastructure and housing, and how this particularly affected the poorest populations, which are largely Roma. But I don't remember a specific case of a coalition, so to say, between the Roma communities and so to say Slavic or whatever communities. of whatever confession, on specific locations where there were field work to be done, or specific. And so I can only speculate what would happen had some of the villages that had been affected by, let's say, a mini hydro energy or something, been half Roma. Maybe then we would, because then we had situations where very poor communities and very old communities fought off mini hydropower, and no reason for those communities not to be Roma, because Serbia in general is very poor. So we need to ask people who focus on that way. I don't have the answer.
If I can maybe chip in for a last word, and I think then we can call this panel off already over time, but one of you said, I think, that often it's NGOs that do this kind of work. And to some extent, I can testify this. I myself work for an NGO. I wasn't running this project in particular that actually kind of deals with similar issues in Hungary, where it's like it's rather framed around issues of housing and energy poverty, which obviously have environmental consequences. And we did a lot of field work in a town in the south of Hungary that's mostly populated by Roma people as well, where there's no connection to the grass grid. So they are using wood to heat, which has huge environmental implications, and also on their own health. And of course, there was like NGO involvement in this, but I don't think that's the main facet of this. Rather, it's that this town had a mayor who did everything to sort of like organize for, I think she was even the person who reached out to us at this NGO so that we can help fundraise or get materials. And she like found like sort of like things in the system where she can apply for more funding, where she can do sorts of things. And like, but again, these are very niche. So I think your point is well taken, that these conversations happen only on the margins. Even though in a context, I can speak again more for Hungary, these are primary issues that many people don't have access to actually safe and affordable energy. And housing conditions are abominable across the country, and this predominantly affects Roma people as well. So indeed, I think it's, I'm very glad that you raised this issue to incorporate into our conversation, even if at the very end. Yeah.
Just to add, we don't have a lot of positive freedom in that respect, but we might have some negative freedom there to be found in a sense that a few years ago, quite strong NGO started to, like, with a strong media and social network presence, pushed more for a racist view on air pollution, which was like really popular. It was before the mini hydropower came to the region. Yes, and they were pushing hard for this racialized narrative of how Roma people were, burning stuff, and that's why we don't have clean air. And this, I would say that mostly this kind of talk has been suffocated, like by the rest of the environmental movement. So no, this is racism, and this is anti-Roma talk, and we won't go there. I don't think that they mention it.
Yeah, they did in 2021,
but they stopped.
Mike, like, this is progress for us. Like, it's crazy to be sitting here and saying this is progress, but it is. Because I remember I actually was on a group with that team of people and went, your post is race, like some post that he posted, I knew he posted before that. I was like, I can't be in this group if we're not going to involve a representative from the Roma community, if you're going to present something that the Roma community is doing as a problem. And he was like, we don't need that, I've got Roma friends. And I was like, no, we need representative now. No, there's a representative that can represent them. And I was like, no, representative now, you're being racist. No, I'm not being racist, I'm being I'm being realistic, or whatever that was. I'm not racist, but I'm But it's progress for us because he stopped doing it. I mean, these are really small fucking steps. I get that. But it was a big deal because he shut the fuck up. He realized it was bad for business,
Okay, I think this is maybe the final sentence we end. And I would like to have a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. As well as to our audience for bearing through the cold, and we promise that tomorrow we'll try to improve on the heating situation. We'll try our best. And I feel like Yulo has some final words. No. Okay, then on that note, thank you for attending the first day of this conference, and I hope to see many/all of you tomorrow in a hopefully warmer room. And once again, thank you to all of you for accepting the invitation and for your contribution. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. To find every other episode, follow our feed. This episode was produced by Lab-Left-nek. Thanks to everyone who made it possible.
Zengok harang, veled együtt zeng a szívem, őt látom, jön már felém. Musikál a világ, velem örül a nyár, tudom én, jön a fényborús napok után. Hozd vissza őt, végtelen nagy szerelem.